Jeff, great to have you,
Thank you.
On the inaugural episode here.
It's an honor.
Well, I thought it was pretty much a no-brainer for this to kind of start it off, because you kicked me off on my leadership journey. But before we get into that, I would like to kind of to lay some background to it. We've known each other for a while.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of research on you.
Okay.
And I did, and didn't realize, I knew you'd been in academia for a while, but 30 plus years?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, because I think, golly, am I really that old? But yeah, if I do the math, well, it's over 30 years.
My math isn't my strong suit, and I added up those years, I'm like,
right. Every once in a while I check it too, because I'm like, surely it's not.
Sure, it can't be.
It just hurts to say I've done anything over 30 years professionally.
Right.
But that's the truth.
Right. So I kind of want to go through, so you have a BA in speech communication, an MA in speech communication.
Correct.
A doctorate education for educational leadership. That makes all of those make sense.
Yeah.
And then a postdoctoral in marketing, which also makes sense to me, looping it into.
That's the world you live in every minute of every day.
Exactly. But in what you deal with, communication, marketing is communication.
Oh, that's huge part of it.
That's what it is. And then, but I kind of wanted to start from the beginning. I noticed that recruitment and people building were interested you. Looked like, at least from your,
Always.
I went to LinkedIn and just looked at your job history, and was like, leadership was always in his blood, and I wanted. Could you expand upon? And also, was it something you always knew, as a kid, even, or?
It's something that I was always drawn to, and when I look back, I find, I loved doing that, but it wasn't like I wish I could say I had this perfect master plan and everything worked out exactly, but that's just not true. But the common thread has been people coaching, growth, helping them get better. Even going back to my student days as a high school, college, student, I was my class president for all through junior high and high school. I was involved in student government.
The pieces are falling into place for me now. Okay.
So there were always different ways that I think it was expressed. But, when sometimes you look back, you see patterns better than you do at the time.
Right. And did you even realize it then, though?
I knew that I really enjoyed it. I was happy to be leading a group or a team or coordinating things. I don't think I had enough sense at that age to think, this could be a career path for me. It was just I love helping things happen. I love working with other people and seeing us do things together that we couldn't do on our own. Okay. And so, I think early on it was just those kind of things that just naturally drew me to that. Okay. Because it was in me and who I was, but I didn't see it maybe for what it was early on.
Right. I was going to say, I didn't realize my journey until really, a little bit in college, but really I was just kind of I was finding myself in college, creativity, that's my jam. And then I feel like the leadership stuff definitely came way later, just because I, either way it was confidence or just not using that muscle,
sometimes we don't need to tap into it depending on what we're doing at that time,
right.
Early on in my career in higher ed, I was in, director, associate dean, leadership kinds of positions. But the whole time looking back, I was teaching and coaching my team and my employees, but I wasn't formally a professor until later on in my 40s.
Okay.
But then, look back at that, I'm like, oh gosh, I love that growth. I love that always, having those kind of things going on and being a part of that. That's where the classroom started to soak in. I love helping these emerging leaders grow and become leaders that haven't really had to be before.
Right. And that was kind of what led me. Well, like I said, we've been friends for a number of years,
Sure.
and then finally I was like, I need to hone this skill that I don't know if I've done a real good job. I knew I didn't want to be a boss. I didn't want to be I just a guy giving out tasks and orders. Like that just was never my style.
Like, gosh, that doesn't sound like fun.
No,
right?
I've had those people, and I was like, I definitely don't want to be those people. And so, but then I was like, well, what does that actually mean?
Right.
And
what's the better way?
Well, yeah, because like I want to be friendly, but I also want to be respected, and there's a lot of
boundaries come into play there. It's like,
totally.
How do I be gracious, kind, and be in charge?
Yeah,
and give,
because we're beholden to the client at the end of the day.
Exactly, because so there's like directions needed, boundaries are needed, even correction sometimes is needed, but that's where the coaching comes in. So as a leader who's a coach more than a boss, we almost have that negative connotation to think, well, if I'm the boss, then I have to crack somebody's knuckles when they make a mistake.
Right.
But as a coach, it's like, hey, let's look at this.
Right.
And I think most of the time people are like, they know. I think most of the time that didn't go like I wanted it to or like I wished it would.
Right.
So then we have an opportunity to sit down and say, wow, okay, this went really well. This part was kind of a mess.
Right.
Let's look at that. Let's learn from it. Let's figure out how we want to make that better the next time those kind of scenarios come up. And then it's like, hey, we're both growing.
Right, exactly. And I think that's something I realized not so only within your mentorship, but like kind of the same with sales. Like when I was first starting my business, like I thought sales was a dirty word.
Right.
And I thought, leader was a dirty word as well. Like I didn't want to be this guy that was like, I want to be everybody's friend. But then I realized like I have to have more of a balance there. And really what it boils down to, and this is your background, communication. It's really about meeting people where they're at and understanding.
Right.
But then also they have to understand you. Like there's just a mutual understanding there.
It is.
And once I figured that out, it was just like, oh no, duh. Like, it was really
it's such a great feeling when we as leaders we kind of reach that progression where we're thinking, wait, I can be a good leader and I can be me.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah.
I don't have to be some
I thought that was
phony, warrior, hardcore. I mean, yes, there's tough decisions in leadership.
Right.
But when we realize I can be me and be a good leader in a unique way that somebody else wouldn't work for them.
Right.
But it works for you.
Right. Well, and laying down that base, like laying down that foundation of that, and knowing that it's there, because I think that's a lot of what was our conversations was. Right. I didn't know I had some of those skills, but I didn't really realize what those were. We kind of went all over there. That was great.
That's cool.
I'd like to kind of go into my questions here, and my first one I got here are because we talked about strengths a lot when you were coaching me.
Love that.
And we always talk about strengths. Really, whenever we meet now,
anytime we're together, we talk. Eventually, we talk about strengths, which is always okay.
What are yours, and how did they kind of guide you along your path?
Right. In terms of specific Clifton strengths, the Gallup assessment, my strengths: number 1, maximizer; number 2, strategic; 3rd is learner; 4th is individualization; and 5th is discipline. And some of those are fairly self-explanatory, but yet, the maximizer, I'm so happy that shows up as consistently, because when I put that in the context of, oh gosh, when I've been a classroom teacher, when I've been a consultant, when I've been a coach, when I've done all those things that I love to do, in that process, I'm finding different ways to maximize. And by that, I mean, I'm helping students to consider new thoughts, to get better, to grow in ways they hadn't even considered maybe. In a coaching environment, like you're talking about leadership, it's like you had components and a foundation for leadership, just maybe you hadn't started laying the bricks, if you will, to form the foundation. And then my feeling was like, oh gosh, they're there. Well, let's just
I was
stack
just
them.
Throwing the bricks kind of randomly.
Yeah, they were kind of on the table or nearby. But when we started working together, it was like, oh, let's put this one, and then the next one, and the next one, and then layer them order, and let's keep building that up. And then it was like, gosh.
Like beam of light.
Yeah, you can be you and be a leader and not violate your own personality, your own self, or how you really want to show up in the world.
Right.
And so that kind of stuff as a maximizer, I'm like, holy cow, you're kidding me. That's some of the most fun stuff I get to do.
Cool. Okay, cool. And did you realize those as you, like, early on, whether in college or even professionally, or did you know about these then, or did you only when you maybe got into coaching did you really kind of dive into?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think over the years, like you described, there are things where I was thinking, okay, I seem to be pretty good at that, whatever that was. But I think with the Clifton Strengths Assessment, the cool thing for me when I first encountered it over 20 years ago was that it helped me almost attach a descriptor or an adjective to something that was one of the best things about me.
Yes. And well, as a learner, you're like, I need to connect these dots.
Yeah. And then that individualization, that's one of my strengths, is seeing unique differences between people and being able to see the connections. That's one of the things. Yeah. And I love that.
That's cool.
And so, so it was in my graduate education and my professional work where I really encountered the specific concept of these are strengths. We can measure those and identify which are your dominants. And that was around 2000 when I first started working with the Strengths Finder assessment.
And then that, was it as kind of revealing as it was for me? Like once I took the test and you laid it out in front of me, I was just like, no way. Gosh. Like, this makes so much sense now.
It was. I mean, it was like 98. I said around 2000. Actually, it was 98 when I started my grad program in ed leadership. And part of the dissertation research was training with Gallup as a strengths coach. And then I did my research study with first-time college students. They all took the strengths assessment.
Nice.
And then I worked with them for a whole semester on how to identify, articulate their best traits.
That's fantastic. I think,
So that was when I kind of went, oh my gosh, this is big, this is huge, because I saw students just come alive in ways that they're like, oh, I never realized that about myself.
Right. I do, since I'm not in the educational world, is that something typical that most?
It wasn't at that point, going back 20 plus years.
Because I feel like they kind of like, well, you're doing good in these classes, here's a job this way,
Right.
Back when I was in college.
20 plus years ago, that was the case, because the strengths assessment was really just available publicly around 98.
Okay.
So it was a newer thing. And that was the cool thing about doing the research study, was I was able to partner with Gallup. And at that time, no one had studied the impact of strengths training and coaching on college students. So that
like
just hadn't been done.
Like a no-dumb moment. Like we need these students understanding who they are.
But it was a new tool. So we did the study, and in the 20 plus years since, not because of me, but because of them and what they've done, now it's used globally. And I know at least in the US, it's used in many, many, many universities in higher ed, that students will take it like at summer orientation before their first year, and then it's embedded in either a freshman orientation course or used in different ways in that way. So it is now embedded in programs and student development approaches all over the country. Not everybody, but all over the country.
I definitely if there would have been a Jeff Williamson or someone just like kind of laying out my strengths.
Right.
Because I feel like I was still just kind of like even after graduation, I was still figuring myself out. And like you said, sometimes those things shine a little bit, but then you're like, well, wait, why did that work so well? And you can't. It's not tangible. You couldn't really do it. And then, but once you sat me down and took me through my strengths, and I should have wrote mine down. I don't have it memorized. Which
it's okay. I'm not gonna throw you out.
Do you remember what my first one was?
Well, I know intellection's one of your.
Yes.
I think that's which the thought processes and thinking about what you think about things.
And that was one of the most eye-opening moments for me, because I thought I was just kind of slow in taking things in, and in a bad way, but no, it wasn't a bad way. It was just like, I need to think about these things and let them kind of like, let them kind of marinate, up here. And once I decided or once you kind of showed me like, this isn't, it's not because you don't understand or you're stupid. It's
you process differently.
I'm processing it differently.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what I do. And I used to kind of get down on myself. I'm like, well, why didn't I pick up on that earlier?
Speed's not always the best.
Speed isn't always the best, especially for me. Like I need to think about it, and also and connectedness I know is one of mine. And I like to see the connections that then kind of happen as well.
Those ideas connecting to another. Yeah.
Right. So and then that's creativity. Like that's that's me. So I'm like, oh, okay, my strengths definitely are playing into who I am. I just didn't have a clear definition of what those strengths were.
Yeah, Gallup says that sometimes it's really the concept of us having a common language.
Oh, yes,
to talk about this, and now that we work together,
that's
and
marketing
talk
too.
It is. It's just this common language, So if I can be who knows where, and if I just hear someone say, "Yeah, I'm a maximizer, so I love that," I'm like, "That's your Gallup strength." And I'm like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I'm like, because I work with that stuff. I have for 20 years. So I love
creating a language around it.
It does. Yeah. And by having a descriptor that's a positive thing, right?
Yes.
That's often a game changer too.
Oh, totally.
I remember when I was doing the research study, about 325 first-time students took the assessment, and then we did a random select, and 32, those 10% of the sample, 10% sample, those are the ones that I trained through their first semester of college. Okay. And then at the end, and they had some training and interventions during the way, but then at the end of the semester, I did one-on-one interviews with them to complete it, and those were wonderful. I remember one of my favorite stories to tell about that was a young lady who was doing her exit interview with me, and I would ask everybody kind of, what are some takeaways? What are some things you'll take with you that really impacted you from learning about your strengths? And she kind of sighed and paused a minute, and she said, for the first time in my life, I feel like it's okay to be me.
Same.
And I was just like, oh my Lord.
Right.
What, to get to have anything to do with someone feeling permission to be who they are at their best was just like, oh my gosh, I could have taken a lap around the building, in
just
celebration.
Because that's what that feeds you. You're like, oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, I get to be part of that. Yeah. And I hope that she carried that forward 20 years ago since I did that study. So, she's pushing 40 now, and I hope she's still living out her strengths.
Yeah, I can't imagine that she wouldn't be, because that was what it was.
Once you get it?
Well, yeah, say the thing. I was like, well, I'm who I am, and I was just kind of dealing with that. But I totally just understand her thought process. Like, oh, this is who I am, and
we don't
that's
put
all right.
We don't put that down when someone goes, "This is one of the best things about you," and here's how it shows up in your life every day. You don't forget that.
And here's how to utilize it in a positive way. And they're like,
holy cow. You don't have, it comes so naturally. They don't have to think, oh, I've got to remember to be a maximizer. I've got to remember to think about what I think about as someone with intellection. You do that.
And you just do it.
You do that.
But once you kind of understand that, you're going to have that internal conversation and external conversation, and just kind of hone those skills more.
Yeah, exactly.
In my leadership journey, and even in my professional journey, I've always had kind of a struggle with imposter syndrome. Like, I wasn't good enough, or I didn't belong at the level that I was at. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if there was any, as a leader, is that common, or is that something you struggled with at all?
Yes, I think it's common.
Okay.
I think most people, if they're really honest, at some point had to feel like, oh boy, I'm maybe in over my head, or am I really up to this? I think early on, when I was early in my years of doing classroom teaching at the university level, I think there were times that, because I taught as an adjunct every now and then for a while when I had my administrative role, but then I eventually transitioned to that's all I did full time for almost 8 years. Okay. And I think there were times when I was doing those classes and teaching them, I can remember it would be like first night of a 6-week graduate course or something, and my heart would be pounding, and I would be like, calming myself. And nobody was even there yet.
Yeah.
And I think a part of that was, I hope I'm up to this.
Right.
I hope I really present as a real teacher, as a real professor.
Right.
And I didn't always know that I did. So I think part of that is imposters. Am I just acting like a professor?
Right.
Or am I really good at this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Parker Palmer did a book years ago, and he's one of my favorite authors, specifically related to teaching and education. And he said, actually, the book's called The Courage to Teach.
Okay.
And a lot of that book is about him helping other faculty members, teachers, that are in that space, figuring out that they really are capable.
That's kind of comforting, as somebody else that's constantly struggles with that.
Well, I think most people, I think it's like there's a variety of emotions that we're not like just volunteer or proud to tell people, I really doubt myself, or I really feel incapable right now.
Right.
But I think in our heart of hearts, if we're honest with each other, it's going, gee whiz. How can, when I'm new at something that I really want to be good at it, and I really want to deliver value, I don't know.
You are going to be a little shaky, but also be okay with that. It's not. Yeah. I felt this feeling creep up as I was giving. I talked to a class of students this past week, and it was about my profession, and then
doing the stuff you do so well.
Yeah, and that's something I was kind of getting sweaty and out of breath, and I was just like, because it matters. Yeah. And then I was like, do I actually belong up here? And then, once I didn't even know an hour had passed after me talking about this, and I go, I was just up in my head about this, and I was overthinking it, or I was just too much in my own brain. But once I started talking about it, and then
this stuff.
And then they were asking me questions, and we were having great conversations after the class. And I was like, and then I was like, I was fine.
You know this stuff.
This. I love it.
And when you're in that space, again, they go back to the strengths. When you're in that space where it's like you're talking about things you love to do, that you're really good at, that you've done professionally for years.
Right.
And then we start thinking, maybe I'm legit. Not in an egotistical way. I mean, we can still be humble and be proud of what we're able to do.
Totally.
You create products, media products and videos and things like that. I mean, it's not ego to look at something and go, man, that turned out really well.
Right.
My client was thrilled, and I'm really proud of that. That's not ego. That's just righteous pride, if I can call it that.
Right. I think instead of I just need to have a better frame of mind. Instead of imposter syndrome, I think it needs to be more reflection. And it's good. Yeah. It's good to question yourself every once in a while and be like, am I as good as I think I am?
Right.
And if I'm not, then how am I going to make myself better? And that really kind of what led me to you.
Yeah. And it comes. I think it comes in stages. And by that I mean, going back to 15, 18 years ago when I was teaching full time and doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, even still, years later, I would be in a new environment teaching and training and still have those moments where I'm like, oh, shoot, I hope this goes okay. Right. And here's the key. Here's one of the things where I think I really started leaving imposter syndrome behind after decades of it.
Okay.
was I was teaching a doctoral course, which was a week-long intensive. And, so we were in class all day, every day for 6 days straight. So you really cover a lot of content, a lot of ground, a lot of material. And I remember that there was a time that, I think before I would kind of stick to the outline, stick to the plan,
Right.
And there was a point that I'll always remember. We were having a conversation that just kind of emerged. And I remember thinking, I'm going to step out on the high wire. And I didn't know where I was going with it or how it was going to go. And we had this rich, meaningful, deep conversation about fear and overcoming fear.
I love that.
And I just thought, that was the most fun I've ever had in the classroom, right? And then you start thinking, whoa, that getting, we all hear get out of your comfort zone, but stepping out of that safe space of I'm sticking to the outline, I know what I'm doing next, I know what I'm going to cover, And I just like, this is a powerful discussion that this group really wants to have. And I literally stepped out in the middle of the class, figuratively going out on the high wire, and we had the incredible conversation about fear,
wonderful.
Overcoming it.
I think, I mean, and in reflecting on my experience, I feel like every time that I was afraid to do something, but I did it anyway, it was such a reward. Like it was, the gains from it was so much more than the
and the more we
fear.
do that, I think, the more the imposter syndrome diminishes, because we're like, I've stepped out of my comfort zone and into a space that really turned out beautifully 8, 10, 12, 15 times. And when that happens, you're like, it's worth the risk.
Oh, every time.
Because those magic moments that I would call them, they happen when I'm kind of letting go of the wheel and saying, we're gonna see where this goes.
It is the unknown. Like that's what's so exciting about it, because then it can lead to so many wonderful things.
To a phrase that I wrote on flip chart. You know, I told you I love flip charts. Have them up on the walls at home and in our bedrooms. And the phrase that I wrote down, and this was the kind of experience that made me think this, was the audience is the hero.
I love that. That's so great.
And it was really after that, I thought, that didn't go magical just because I stepped out and talked. It went really well because I stepped out and asked questions and shut up. And then that engaged them to say, oh, have I ever had imposters? Have I had fears? Have I felt uncertain?
Right.
And then when they started engaging that topic and sharing about it, and this familiarity of people going, yeah, man, I've been there too. Then we all kind of went, and we're fine.
And like, oh, look, we're still here. We survived it.
Yeah.
It's not.
So I think that was one of those
cool.
experiences where I thought, the audience is the hero, not me.
Yeah, right.
I just get to conduct the orchestra.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I love that. I'd like to go into my next question, which is inspiration, but also kind of like when you're feeling stuck, when you're feeling maybe a little discouraged, like, is there something you do that gets you out of that rut? Or, I don't know, what is your process? Because I have a process that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But
Right. Well, since you've known me a long time, it won't come as a surprise to you to say, if I feel like I'm stuck or I need to change my mindset or my frame of mind, it often involves a change of place. Now, by that, I don't mean I move to another town.
Right.
I mean, I may be at home and feeling a bit isolated or not energized, because being together with people, being in places like this energizes me and gives me a lot of joy. And so if I'm feeling, work from home is a blessing sometimes, but for extroverts like me, I'll come to a coffee shop, or I'll go to the classroom, or I'll go to a place on a campus nearby where I'm connecting with people that I know or that know me. And then when I'm there, I get that energy from them, and it lifts my spirits, or it lifts my level of joy. So that's something I do if I'm a new place and being around people.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that lifts me up.
I'm kind of a little bit of both of those. Like I'll go to a space to do that, but a lot of times if I need to recharge, I like to go on hikes. I like to go on walks in nature, or even in just in neighborhoods, just to get some space to breathe. And I listened to I read an article. I forget what the guy's name is. Holiday. Ryan Holiday, I think he's a stoicism kind of guy, but his big thing is like, walks are for thinking. Mm-hmm.
It's for intellection.
I was like,
perfect.
I was like, I've used that because I used to like throw on some music or throw on some a podcast, but I'm like, I like, and that's the thing. Like sometimes like when I just kind of let it be quiet, my mind, and just go, and it's like, some of the best things kind of come out of it. And then also like, I feel like that unstuckness goes away, and or I completely forget about it. Just kind of like it's left, So.
Yeah, I think that was a good byproduct of the 2 years of COVID issues we've dealt with, is that there was a time when all we could do was
just
step out of our house and walk around the neighborhood in distance. And wow, that started becoming a part of my days when it wasn't freezing cold and snowing. I'm like,
same.
I'm going to get out and walk a few blocks down to this little park that has a lake and loop around that and then come back.
Right.
And when I did that,
yeah.
you know, and so, yeah, I think those spaces, even as a chatty extrovert, I have more frequently in recent months intentionally gone on walks, gone for a run, and not taken my phone, not taken my headset for that reason, to just process.
Leave it all behind.
Process and think and feel it and live it in my head without noise.
Yep. Something that recharges me, especially creatively, is, you know, working with my team or working with a team. And I love seeing ideas come together, and you'll have an idea, she'll have an idea, I'll have an idea, and then they just kind of
percolation.
The percolation, and then they're just a kind of a part of the ether, you know, they're in the universe, you know, and it's really nobody's idea. It's just
I call it a gumbo. It's sometimes like gumbo.
There you go,
It's like we need all that stuff in here,
but
what it makes together is different and wonderful.
Yeah. And when I see those things culminate, I'm just like, oh man, it's just so, I don't know, it's just so rewarding. I just love seeing, just
me too.
Witnessing creativity. I love being creative myself, but like seeing other people like really come to ideas.
Watching it emerge is sometimes as fun as I have this idea that I want to, you know, develop. I see that all the time.
Yeah, I
for
love
sure.
That. We talked a little bit about this before as I was setting up, and you said you had a good story involved in this. What was the worst conflict as a leader you had to resolve?
Yeah, so this would probably have been, I was 28, 29 years old, which unfortunately is a long time ago. And I was a new director at another university, and I had a person who I had gotten to know during their student years. Good guy. I still think he's a good guy, you know, good heart, good intentions, etc. And so I hired him for an entry-level position. I thought he'll be fantastic. And he was for a little while. And then for whatever reasons, it just seemed like the air was out of his tires. He just started dragging in later and leaving earlier. And then when he was there, you know, he was missing reports and data he was supposed to submit each week and that kind of thing. And I, as a new leader, I was like, oh boy, I don't know really how to figure this out.
Right.
And where I had to take action eventually was my top performer, who had the same job on a team of 4 or 5 people, came to me and said, this person's doing this, this, and this. They're not doing this and this and this. What are you going to do about it?
Okay.
So now I had my top performer, rock star person saying, are you going to let this happen?
Right.
And I couldn't. I wouldn't.
Right.
And so the short story is I took the person through we're going to do a 90-day process, meet regularly, goals, outcomes, etc. Sign here, sign there. And 90 days later, I had to just say, things haven't changed, and I'm really sorry, but you're not going to work here anymore.
Oof.
And that was the first time that I ever had to terminate someone.
Okay.
And I sincerely cared about this guy. I really liked him. I really wanted him to pull it out, and he just didn't.
Right.
And it was rough. I lost friends over it, etc.
I'm sure.
It was hard.
Because that's being a people person and being somebody that wants to
it was hurtful.
Oh, totally. And so how
for him and me, and me, but more for him than me, I guess.
Right.
But
And when going through that, and as a leader, do you kind of look upon yourself like, oh, well, maybe I didn't lead him appropriately, or maybe I didn't, give enough direction? Because I feel that a lot in my leadership journey as well. It's like
maybe that's when imposter popped back in.
Well,
Oh, what kind of leader am I? I don't even know how to motivate this guy or get him to be productive and do the job he was hired for. But the thing that really helped me, maybe even saved me, and this is something I still recommend to people today, is I went to an experienced professional at another organization and said, confidentially and anonymously, here's what I'm facing. I'm a new director. I've never had this situation come up. I'm not sure what to do.
Right.
Fortunately, that person worked for a large corporation and literally went to a shelf and pulled out this 3-ring binder on hiring and firing processes and how to, right? To try to save someone's career or turn them around, and then if not, how to graciously and respectfully.
Because at the end of the day, you want them to succeed. You have a vested interest in them succeeding.
Yeah. And so, so in that case, I tapped into a professional who was probably 10, 15 years older than me, had many years in a corporate environment, and said, oh yeah, here's the training guide on that. And I literally took that national organization that if I said their name, you'd recognize them. And I followed that corporation's process for hiring and firing and processing, those kinds of things. And had I not had that, it could have been a total train wreck.
Oh, right.
Because I don't think most of us especially early in our careers or ever, have training on how to terminate people that aren't doing their job well.
Right.
And I had nothing.
I didn't. I remember reaching out to you at a time where I was having a difficulty.
What do I do with this?
So like I'm having this difficulty with this employee. Mm-hmm. What do I feel like I've gone the distance. We
can tell. I feel like I've failed them. Right.
Yeah. So I'm just like, what do I do? Like I don't know. And we had many conversations about that with the employee, and it was like nothing. We weren't meeting. Like I said at the beginning of this, we weren't understanding each other.
Yeah,
like what the needs of the job were and what their needs were as well. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you're like, okay, you got to do what's best.
Yeah.
For you and the company, and really at the best for them. Because if they're not a fit for the position, then they're just not a fit. Like you can't put a square in a circle in a circle hole. So so leading right into that, how do you continue to grow as a leader?
Well, I think no matter how many years of this or that or how many degrees people have, if they can keep a teachable spirit. I often say to people, I know a lot about a little bit. Right? You've heard me say that before probably. Because I want people to understand that just because I have training experience in these areas, and I'm pretty good at some things, the vast expanse of what I don't know and don't have all the answers for is massive. And so that helps me to keep that kind of attitude of kind of going, I know a little bit, but there's so much I don't understand about creative work and media and finance and accounting and things that I'm not trained in. And so
but be good at your strengths.
Yeah, right. So
knowing when you
it's having the humility to know I don't know everything about everything. And sometimes frankly I see people that have advanced education think that because they're an expert in a certain area that makes them an expert in everything. And I always found that distasteful. I'm like, man, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
So having humility, having a teachable spirit, and letting people see, not just that I know, but let them see that I don't think I have all the answers.
Right.
I can help you with the
few
also
things. Being completely upfront about that. Like, I don't know everything.
Right, yeah.
But I will help you in these areas.
Right, yeah. And not being afraid to say, gosh, I don't know, but I'm going to do some research.
Yeah.
And I'm like with the hiring, firing thing, I'm going to go to a professional who knows exactly how to do this
has some experience in it,
Has some experience. This person was a director of sales, had lots of employees. So I'm like, I at least had enough sense to go ask somebody else, how is the best way to do this? Because I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Right.
And just have the courage to admit that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
what's interesting about that phrase, teachable spirit, is and I didn't realize it until the professor that I spoke at for the class told me, I love sending interns to you because you have a teachable spirit. And I'm like, boom. It didn't even dawn on me that I just knew that I'm like, well, my knowledge isn't sacred, something that I'm going to keep to myself. It's sacred in a way like I want to give it to, I want to be able to like pass it along. Yeah. And she's like, that's what I love about you. Yeah. Like you want to make them better. You know?
And you continue to be a student. Yeah. And the cool thing is in the space you work with creative work and media and videography and all those kinds of things, is there is so much that continues to emerge.
Oh, yes.
Softwares and technology and tools and all that kind of stuff where it's like, there's always new stuff that's amazing.
Totally. And especially as students, they're connected to that possibly a little bit more than I am. So I always started the conversation like a good student is a good teacher and a good teacher is a good student. And I go, you have some to learn from me because I have experience, but I have some to learn from you because you're connected more to what's going on now.
Right. Yeah, they're digital natives. They don't know a world without cell phones and the internet. And we're like, I can remember back in,
recorded phone.
And I can just see that, it's like, okay, stop right there, Jeff. Just don't even finish that sentence.
Right. Yeah. So we're kind of nearing our time here, but I wanted to end with what are some suggestions to help hone leadership skills? I don't know, in general. Do you have any? I guess it's kind of a multi-part question. Like, is there some things we could do? We as a leadership community do to hone our skills, and then is there some books or podcasts that kind of? So.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is be a reader.
Okay.
I mean, even when people say, I don't really read much, I'm like, well, when you're a kid, you didn't swim much, but you learned how to do that, and you maybe actually enjoy it now.
Exactly. That's me.
But as a learner, I am always, I literally have 3 or 4 books right now that I am at different stages of reading.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm always reading multiple books. And I'm not saying everybody has to go deep in like I do. And I have, this stack of 8-10 books. So if somebody suggests a really good title, I'm like, oh, Amazon. And when it comes, I put it on the bottom of my stack so that I keep working my way down. And the new ones go in.
Right.
And I work my way through those. But I never reach a point where I'm like, I have more books to read.
Right. Cool.
So that's one thing that I always suggest is be a reader. I really think good leaders are usually reading.
That's something that I took that you offered to me as well, and I get to the office around 7:45, 8 o'clock, and for the first hour of my day, I read a chapter of a book.
Yeah,
and so I hadn't ever really done that before. I went through your mentorship, and in that I'm like, it really like it's kind of refreshing. It starts my day off. I learn something, and and then I get to start my day.
And sometimes it even gets us unstuck.
Oh, totally,
I'm working on a project that you and I have talked about many times, and I just was feeling stuck, like I hadn't made any progress in a couple of 3 weeks. And then I was reading one of my multiple books that were referred to me, and I was reading that book. I looked at it, I thought, this structure this is exactly what I need for this writing project. And I changed how I was going to do that. And now it's making sense to me. Awesome. So it got me unstuck and back on my own writing project. The other thing that I would say too, and you mentioned this, and it relates back to reading and books, is there's an organization here that I've done now 2 different book series for their leadership team.
Okay.
So they picked out a book they wanted to read through, and so they read a chapter, and then I did a weekly, in this case it was Zoom, did a weekly Zoom conversation, really kind of teaching that chapter and reiterating the key concepts. And so sometimes, being a part of a book series or just an informal book club, sometimes organizations will do that. Okay.
Keeps you accountable.
It does. It's like, if there's 4 or 5 other people that's a part of it, then we're all doing this together.
Yeah.
There can be some team building things there. So reading continues to be a part of that. And the other thing I would just say is I think everybody needs a mentor. I do, and so I have those times where I need feedback on something from other people who are in my circle of friends or my professional circle, that I'll say, hey, could you guys meet me for coffee? I'm trying to figure my way through something. And I'd really love to hear your feedback or your suggestions or ideas, and that really helps me a lot, because then I tap into their leadership experience. I tap into their pool of resources or their pool of people who are like, oh, I know somebody who could really help with that. I'm like, oh, great. I would never have come across that person without that friendship or that coworker that says, oh my gosh, yeah, I know who you can talk to. They're awesome at that.
That's cool. Because mentors is a huge thing. And I guess I never really actively, sought out them, but they are in my life. Like now that I've like really kind of like know that, and you're definitely one of them. And what's interesting, like I wanted to like ask you to maybe kind of as a follow up to that, like, do you feel that mentors are like a single person or like your mentorship like?
That's a great point. Sometimes it's both.
It's both.
You know, I can think of, you know, just 2-3 people in my life who are that one-on-one, hey, can we get lunch? I need to process something, or I need your feedback on something.
Okay.
And I'll meet one-on-one with that person who's always thoughtful, insightful, asks great questions, and helps me think through things. The other thing is that I've for years, and I wish I'd thought of this concept, but I didn't, but is having a personal board of directors. Oh. I've heard people say that, you know, where it's kind of like there's 3-4 people who, you know, and sometimes they don't even really know it just because they're such trusted friends. But sometimes I will say to those 3-4 people who are kind of my go-tos when I'm at a crossroads and I need to figure something out. I'll say, hey, can we all get together? I need some feedback from my personal board of directors, and they'll laugh and say, absolutely. What day can you do lunch?
I love that.
And so I'll get those 3-4 together with me and say, okay, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm considering, and that gives them space to go, that would be great for you. I can totally see that working. Or they can say, I don't know, man. What's the end game? Or where do you see that ending up? And then sometimes I'm like, yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that. That's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I go, that's what I needed. Thank you.
And that's
because there's already trust and relationship there. Mm-hmm. And so that's such a big thing.
We need honest feedback, not just somebody who's like, oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And those people, for me anyway, I need them to not tell me what I want to hear.
Right.
I need them to tell me truth. I need to speak truth into whatever question or concepts I'm asking.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any books or podcasts you can recommend?
You know, yeah. One of the books that we did the book series on with the organization I was mentioning was Adam Grant's book called Think Again.
Okay.
And it's really current and recent, and he really helps people to think again about our assumptions, our biases, what we think we know. I'm doing the air quotes, on purpose. And so that one was a really good one. Another one we did recently was Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead.
Yep.
Has some great resources there. You know, anytime like that. Power of Habit is another good one that we can.
I'm trying to remember if I read that one.
Richard Duhigg, called The Power of Habit.
Okay.
It's another one that I highly recommend.
Cool. Any podcasts you listen to, or any?
Yeah, well, sometimes it's the same.
Okay.
Adam Grant, love that.
Okay.
I love listening to Rachel Hollis once in a while too. She's an author, speaker that it really has some good insights and depth of things that she shares. So she's another one that I really tune in and listen to. The other one I would say is Greg Mcewen.
Ooh, okay.
And he's really his book called The Essentialist.
Okay.
Is he helps people think about what's essential in your life.
Right.
So it's not the same thing as minimalist.
Right. It's like
but it's kind of minimalizing ideas and values and living within that rather than trying to be all things to all people. So,
okay. Cool.
So that's another good one, Greg Mcewen.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for your time and your
this has been fun.
all of the things. This has been fun for me too, and I'm very happy with everything that we talked about today. So thank you.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Thank you.